Okay, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Blue View podcast. And yes, today is a bit of an emergency podcast because news has come out from the Athletic that Frank Lampard is indeed risk of being sacked by Chelsea Football Club after our 3-0 loss against Manchester City. So, we've got a returning guest on. He was on last episode with Medianoera. So, you want to say a quick hello before we get into things?
Hey guys, I'm back under different
So
circumstances.
It's going to be a very interesting episode today. We've got a lot to talk about, obviously, in terms of the game and the future of the club and different things that have come out from different sources tonight. So we'll go through all of that, but let's talk a little bit about the game first, and then we'll go on to Lampard's future. But I don't want to spend too much time on the game because, to be honest, you all know how shit it was. It was very, very bad. And, I just think it's another performance where you gobsmacked, really, that you don't know what to say. You're just furious. More spam crosses into the box when we had Timo Werner at striker. Players just didn't look like they cared or looked like they were playing for the manager. And I think this sort of comes out with the news, which I'm going to go on to in a little minute, as to basically the players sort of starting to down tools on Lampard. So let's start off anyway with the views on the game from Medianoera, our guest, and then we'll go on to Dubois, of course, and then we can just, go on to Lampard. So, Mediano, quick thoughts on the game.
It was a combination of Conte 0-0 or 1-0 and Sarri 6-0, which means it was worse than both. It was atrocious. I honestly couldn't believe that we were at home and we played like that. Just tactics were off. We didn't run hard. We didn't press well. The players didn't show up. Lampard didn't show up. It was the top to bottom. It was a disaster.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. To be honest, it's just, I'm sort of like lost for words as to how many sort of games we've had this season where I've just been like, yeah, this has been terrible. Because at the start of the season, everyone was like, oh, yeah, we've got all these new signings, skimming amazing attacking football. Lampard last season was putting up good attacking stats with the sort of, Pulisic, Tammy Abraham and the Willian front three. So we was all sort of gassed to see this, new look attacking Chelsea side. We just thought we was going to be able to outscore most teams. And to be honest, it's gone completely the opposite. It seems like, at least for Lampard, that signing so many players has sort of hindered him a bit because obviously, he just doesn't seem to know to get the best out of all the players. And obviously there's been a couple of standout performers like Silva and probably, who could you say, Ziyech maybe? But, even today Ziyech wasn't great. It's just, I don't know, man. It's very, very difficult to explain. To Bob, what do you think about, obviously, the game, the lineup, the formation? Is there anything you had a particular problem with today?
Not really. I think a lot of Chelsea fans would have agreed as well. I think the lineup was one we've always wanted to see from the start. It's that front three that we all want to see in action. So I can't really complain with the team selection. I mean, only question mark was Callum Hudson-Odoi over Ziyech if Ziyech wasn't, fully fit, etc. But apart from that, the lineup pre-match stuff I thought was fine. It's in-game which sort of the main thing from that game, apart from tactics-wise, didn't really seem to be anything clear tactic involved in that game. It was the fact that the players didn't seem like they were playing for a manager whose job was under threat, and that was worrying. I think that was the most worrying thing which came from that game. And I know you'll touch upon it soon, but if you couple that with the reports, then it doesn't look like a promising picture at the moment, I don't think.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's just, enough of these bad performances for me, to be honest. I think the club are starting to realise as well that maybe Lampard isn't the right person at the moment. It'll be very interesting to see what happens. So anyway, let's get on to the talk about Lampard and the reports that have come out tonight. So obviously, as I said at the start of the episode, the Athletic are saying he's in risk of basically losing his job, although in the article it does say that he can still stay if sort of results improve. But I think the main takeaway we have to look at is that, Lampard is basically starting to lose some of the players in the dressing room. And usually when you have that situation at Chelsea, it's never ending well. It's only ever ending one way, and that's with the manager being sacked. We've seen this numerous times. So for me, it's starting to look like the beginning of the end, if not the end. We'll just have to wait and see sort of, what happens really. So it's going to be interesting. But in terms of like the next manager that could be appointed. Different sources are saying that it could be Tuchel or Allegri. That's coming from the Daily Mail, and also obviously the Athletic are saying that Pochettino was originally our first choice, but obviously he's gone to PSG now. So it looks like this has sort of been going on for a little while now, where Chelsea have sort of been looking at the squad and the team and the manager thinking, this is not good enough, the performance is not good enough, and obviously it's a results-based business, so it all falls back to the manager. So yeah, Mediano, what do you think of, Lampard in general? What do you think is going to happen? Who's going to come in next? Just give me the whole sort of breakdown of what you think is going to happen.
The situation reminds me almost seamlessly of 2015 under Mourinho. I think CFC Daily tweeted something along the lines, but we're seeing a fan favorite just completely lose the wheels. There's one thing where we're playing well and we're setting up well and we're not getting outright dismantled, but the manner in which we lost, I think it's 5 out of 6 now, we're getting absolutely dismantled. I don't see, like, he's dropping players that deserve to be dropped and we're losing, and then he plays the players that shouldn't play and then we still lose. So it seems like he's wedded to his 4-3-3, and I see claims that it's just to get the best out of Mount, but I don't think so. That's besides the point. But regardless, you need to be more flexible than that. Pep Guardiola ditched his 4-3-3 and he's playing a double pivot now. If Lampard was Pep Guardiola and he refused to abandon his 4-3-3 and its variations, then sure. He's won the lot with it, but Lampard isn't Pep, and I get he has a vision, but sometimes his vision can be clouded. He is human, and it just screams of nepotism. He just doesn't take blame. Even under Mourinho, he'd hit out the players, but then he'd hit out at himself to take the blame off the players. And what Lampard's doing isn't even getting the media off the players' back. It's, if anything, he just seems to be adding more fuel to the fire, at least in terms of public relations. And so where do we go from here? The squad doesn't even look like they're playing for him. We look well out of ideas going forward. We look disastrous at the back again. The space between our midfield was like hilarious today. It was literally laughable. Like, De Bruyne had the one player you don't want in acres of space is Kevin De Bruyne, and we literally allowed him acres of space every time. And he didn't make the necessary changes. I don't know. He's overplaying some players and he's not playing in like others enough. He should have dropped Ziyech for sure. He's not fit, but and Cho's fit. So, and he's been playing well. So why do you drop Cho? I get there's the board pressure, but the board are pressuring you to play the 150 million pair of Germans, not Ziyech. Ziyech's like fine on his own, he's 27. But the other massive money signings, you didn't even end up playing Havertz until the 80th minute, right? So why bench Cho for like a clearly unfit Ziyech? Like it was a disaster, and I don't see how he fixes it. Like, he can't dip into the market again. He just spent £200 million. So, like, at one point we have to ask, what is a manager's mandate? What is he here for? Either to win or to develop players. The players look shell-shocked and out of ideas, so that goes out the window, and we're not winning, so that goes out the window. So where does he stand? That's where I stand on it.
Yeah, and the worrying thing for me, actually, I've just read on Twitter, is that Lampard's sort of interview after the game, people were saying it sort of sounded like a plea to the board for him to stay, and him sort of trying to convince people that things can improve. And I think, the interview is basically just begging him, the board's giving more time, basically, from what I'm hearing from multiple people. So, I mean, that's interesting in itself. I think one thing we have to state, guys, is that although that, I have been Lampard out for a little while now, and people might think that me particular, I'm enjoying this. I can assure you I'm not bloody enjoying this. Like, the ultimate goal for me, for Medianoera, for De Boer, for everyone at Chelsea, as Chelsea fans, is for Lampard to succeed, because as we've said before, like everyone grew up watching this guy, so it's like, it's something you have to. I mean, you can sort of have a little bit of sentiment, but in sort of this position, the table where we are right now, it's just not good enough, and we have to sort of leave sentiment aside, and I think that's what the board are going to do as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens over sort of the next few hours, few days, weeks, whatever, however long it takes, basically, to sort of sort all this out. And it's just very interesting for me, because obviously, like, it's not like one source is coming out saying it, it's multiple sources. And I mean, for me, something that Medianoera has talked about as well is that Havertz and Werner, like, the board are like struggling, to see what's basically the point. Like, what is Lampard doing with these guys? Werner and Havertz are struggling, and I think that's taken into consideration, their decision maybe when they do sack him. Mediano, I know you said obviously before that Havertz and Werner, like, Roman Abramovich won't choose Lampard over them. Do you agree with that? Because for me, I agree with that. That Lampard will definitely be gone before any action is taken with them two.
I think what all Chelsea fans should always remember is the squad comes first. We had Mourinho, and we had Mourinho version 2, and we had Ancelotti, and now we have Lampard, and all of them have suffered the same thing. At Chelsea, if you lose the dressing room, you're swiftly out the door. It's that simple. The squad is what makes Chelsea Chelsea, and that's why I argue on Twitter for hours on end, because Chelsea do have an elite squad now. Last year, he overachieved massively. I couldn't believe it. We came fourth with probably the 7th best squad in the league, but he just added 200 million pounds worth of legitimate Champions League caliber players. Havertz has Champions League goals. Werner Champions League goals. Ziyech Champions League goals. Chilwell won the title at Leicester. Like, these aren't. We didn't buy poor players, so it's either every single player we bought is poor, or, which is unlikely, or Lampard isn't getting the best out of them, and the performances suggest it's the latter. It's, if you lose the dressing room, you're gone, and if those reports are true that he has lost the dressing room, and that there are figures in the squad that aren't taking kindly to his actions, then the end is looking a lot closer than I thought pre-match.
Yeah, it's just obviously very sad to see this happen. I mean, I've just seen pictures of Lampard. Looks like he's about to cry himself in the interview. So yeah, it's definitely a lot's going to come out, I think, when Lampard does eventually go. I think he's going to explain a lot more on the struggles he faced. Obviously, he can't really do that at the moment because he is the manager, and he'd just be gone if he said anything, now anyway. So, Dubois, what do you think about the fact that obviously Lampard does have the worst win percentage rate of any Chelsea manager in history? Do you think that in itself is a sackable offence tonight? Do you think that, do you think that he should have been gone earlier? Do you think that maybe this was the final straw? Do you think that he should be given a few more games? Like, what is your overall view on what should happen?
It's a hard one in terms of the win percentage, because I guess last season we're talking about, I think he did really well last season, considering circumstances and, all the external factors. And I think this season it's hard because I think, like you said, it's the hardest thing is also putting sentiment aside. And I think that's one of the things which has kept as many in for that long, is the fact that sentiment is obviously going to be there when it's Frank Lampard. He's a club legend, but again, after this result, you think about Arsenal, and then if you put the performances aside and you look at the way the players responded after Arsenal, they didn't. Yes, they responded in a way that, okay, it was a better performance than Arsenal, but you still don't see, like Medianoera touched upon, it's not a performance that you'd expect from players who want to fight for their manager's job. And that's worrying because at Chelsea, we've realised and we've seen in the past that history could be repeating itself here. I mean, with Jose Mourinho, you could see it on the pitch. The players weren't fighting, and we're in danger of following a similar path if we continue like this. Whether he should be gone after tonight, I think that again we can all have an opinion on it. But at the end of the day, that's up to the board. And if these reports are true, then Frank Lampard, Roman's not shy to pull the trigger. This guy is a serial winner. He's not going to settle for mediocrity. So it's one that I think if he doesn't go tonight and say he does wins, at Fulham, the next time we lose a game, the scrutiny is just going to come back. And I think the more important thing to note is that if the reports that he's lost the dressing room are true, then we're delaying the inevitable, really. Because, again, the lost dressing room is very rarely salvaged. So, again, I think it's one that it all depends on how badly, if it's true that he's lost the dressing room, if it's something which is serious and it's escalating, and you can kind of see that on the pitch with the performances haven't been great. I mean, it's sort of delaying the inevitable the more we wait, and it's becoming evident now with everything that's going on. But I think one thing's that it's important to note as well that this situation probably hurts Frank Lampard as much as it hurts anyone else. This guy's Chelsea. I'm sure he's the last person to want this to happen to his club. And I think every Chelsea fan will wish him, if it is the end, and if he does end up getting sacked soon, I think every Chelsea fan should respect that, and wish him the best, which I think they will. And the important thing is that his playing career will never be tarnished. And, we'll all wish him the success for the future if it is the end for him. But it could be one where a manager will have to come in and take us to that next step with the players we have.
And that's what I've said all along is, like, of course, this is going to hurt Lampard probably more than the fans, because Lampard, like, he is Chelsea, but it's just obviously it's a very bad situation, and I think that you just can't draw like comparisons between the player and the manager. And one thing I'm seeing here from his interview is that Lampard said that I had days like this and lifted a trophy at the end of the year. Frank Lampard draws comparisons between his time as player and manager as the Chelsea, game, and it just goes on, basically blabbers on from there. But I think that's like the one thing that you can't do is draw comparisons. And I think the fact that he's drawing comparisons from his player days just says a lot, really, because Lampard as a player was incredible, one of the best midfielders of all time. And it's just so much different as a manager. There's so many different things that you have to do, so much just, you can just tell he's not ready for it, man. You really can. Like, I've always said with Lampard, just bring him back in a few years when he has more experience. Like, and to be honest, I don't know what you two think, but I think that part of the blame is actually on the board in the first place for hiring Lampard, because they knew that this was eventually going to happen anyway with the lack of experience and stuff. So, like, what do you think about that view, Mediano? That, yes, you can blame Lampard, but is the board partly to blame as well? Because they brought him in. They knew this was going to happen eventually. Why not get, if they really didn't believe he was going to get eventually sacked, then why don't you just do the right thing and then get rid of him after last season? Although that would be incredibly hard to do because he got top 4. But, like, why didn't you just get rid of him, and bring an actual elite manager in if you knew that this was going to happen anyway?
So this is going to be a little bit of a tangent, but we'll start here. Money makes everything go round. At one point, we always had the money, but we didn't have the draw. And Frank Lampard was brought in to, as we know, to steady the ship and breed the youth and so on and so forth. And to that extent, he succeeded, and he succeeded massively. He got top 4. Cho, Mount, Tammy, Reese, Billy are now part of the first team picture. And so to that extent, we needed someone to build the squad, because the squad was in tatters. We had Pedro and Giroud starting for us and they're great players and so on. But for a club of Chelsea stature, they were not necessarily good enough to take us where we needed to be, which is to challenge for the league. And so what Lampard gave us was a figurehead, which we didn't have until apart from Mourinho. And so he gave us a figurehead for the project, and then he signed players we would have never signed without him. That's first and foremost what should be said, is that without Frank Lampard, there would be no Timo Werner or Kai Havertz. That is a fact of the matter, And so I think what he did last season is commendable, and it's valiant. And I was blown away that he even got top four. But like I said on the last pod, if you give a driver that's used to driving a Fiat a Ferrari, he doesn't use it to the fullest extent. Lampard is used to a Fiat. He's not used to the Ferrari. And now he has a Ferrari type squad. That's the problem here. He had the draw as Frank Lampard to pull these players. Chelsea didn't. Now Chelsea have an elite squad and we can draw top players again. But is Frank Lampard the one to use those players to get us where we need to be? That's where I remain doubtful at this point. I don't think Lampard can drive the Ferrari to the finish line. It's looking increasingly unlikely that he's that man. Either he's maybe not tactically competent. I don't know. Maybe he's too idealistic. He's a rookie. He's only been in management for 3 years. There's a horde of excuses I can list, but at this point he doesn't have the time. The time's not being afforded to him, and he should have known that. And it's all falling apart. His master plan of a 4-3-3 with Havertz and Mount as 10s, with Reece bombing forward on the right, with Ziyech inverting, with Werner and Tammy being a strike partnership. It's all unraveling at the seams, and that's because I think he thought he was getting ready-made players when he wasn't. We know that Havertz needed to adjust, so why wouldn't you buy a midfielder and play a double pivot? Or we knew Werner needed to adjust, so why wouldn't you set up Pulisic and Cho for different games so that Tammy and Werner can play alongside each other? I'm not being paid 8 million quid a year to answer these questions, but there are a lot of questions around Lampard's decisions, and I think his mandate was to get the squad to a better level, which he did because we have an elite squad. And then his second mandate was to challenge with the squad, and I think that's where he's fallen short. And I don't think it'll change anytime soon from what I'm seeing. The players just, like, Ziyech just spams crosses. Pulisic just looks to go to the byline and beat a player. Like, there's no central penetration and why, I don't understand. Like, you have £100 million number 10, but you don't want to play a double pivot. So it's just, it doesn't really make sense. And the system isn't allowing him to play as a 10, even with a single pivot, right? Like, it's not like Lampard is coaching Havertz to nestle in a certain area like Pep did with De Bruyne in the right half space. Havertz is dropping deep when he's not a deeper midfielder. And, like, it'll make him more well-rounded in the future, but Lampard doesn't have the time to wait for that, right? So it's like he needed to make an immediate impact with these signings, and he didn't. And so it leads me to believe, like, the job has come too soon, I guess. Like, I'm not really sure how else to put it. It's not looking bright for him. Like, either he didn't understand the players before he bought them, or he thought that he could, I guess, shoehorn them into this system. But the system isn't Pep Guardiola's 4-3-3, and it isn't Klopp's 4-3-3. It's kind of like a mix of both. But Lampard isn't a mix of both Pep and Klopp tactically. So it's like, what are you trying to do? It's like he's trying to do too much. He should have just kept it simple, run like a basic 4-3-3 or a basic double pivot, and rotate. It's not that hard. You can keep Havertz happy while keeping Cho happy, while keeping Pulisic happy, and so on. That's the job of a top manager. That's his mandate. That's what he's there for, right? So I'm not sure where we go from here.
I mean, it's going to be very interesting because Lampard has said that he's not concerned about losing his job immediately off the back of the defeat, and he's saying that we are fighting to match the levels of Man City and it will take time. But it's just, that's all he can really say is, time. But as fans, it's hard to see where it improves. And if you're the board, how much time do you give Lampard? It's just, I don't know, man. It's all very, very confusing. But let's say that Lampard does get sacked. Dubois, who would be your number one sort of choice to take over Lampard?
If we're talking currently, there's realistically only two options available that are like quality-wise, standard, managerial-wise, up to the standard, and there'd probably be Allegri and Tuchel. I don't know if I said right, Tuchel or Tuchel, I don't know, but I think Allegri would be, in my opinion, I think Allegri would be regressing, considering the squad we have. I mean, yes, some might argue that he's a serial winner, he's won things, but um, with the squad we have, and we've shifted away from sort of that Conte, I think was the last we had, of sort of that pragmatic football, the defensive football, and we sort of shifted. We brought in players to sort of fit a more free-flowing, more adaptable, flexible side of football, more modern football, I'd call it. And I think Tuchel would be more suited towards that. So that's why I think out of those two, I'd definitely go with Tuchel. I think he's shown it in his previous jobs as well, that I think he's as a manager, in terms of a managerial career, I think he's slightly underrated, considering what he's done again at Dortmund and then PSG. Obviously, he's just been sacked, but I think he has some stats. Don't quote me on it, but with the win percentage in League One with PSG, I think it's the highest they've had. But I think he would fit our squad better, so that's why I would lean towards him. I'm not taking anything away from Allegri, but I think if we went to Allegri, we're regressing and going back to the football which we sort of move away from. And the players we've signed, I'm not sure they fit. I can't see Havertz, for example, and Werner, maybe Werner more so, but Havertz and players like that, it just doesn't seem logical to bring in a manager like Allegri. But yeah, if it was to pick, I'd say Tuchel.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I know that Medianoera wants to wrap off this episode. Why do you want Allegri so much, and why are you not in favour of Tuchel over Allegri?
Because at the end of the day, Tuchel's an idealist. He's not a pragmatist. And if we look down the line of successful managers, it's almost as if history's repeating itself. We build a really good squad, we get an adaptable manager, he pieces it together, and he wins. Conte, Mourinho, Ancelotti, Mourinho again, and so it's really no secret that Allegri is probably the most pragmatic and adjustable manager. You know, he's not wedded to any ideal or system. He sees, like Conte in his first preference, he's a tailor. He sees his squad and he tailors what he can around the squad, you know. And at this point, I honestly don't care about our play style, because if you look at the stats, I'm quite sure all of Allegri's Juve teams outscored Maurizio Sarri's Juve team. And if I'm not mistaken, I think two of Allegri's Juve teams outscored Sarri's Napoli team. So if the fact of the matter is we won't score goals, it's just resoundingly incorrect. What we need is to be pragmatic sometimes. We look like amateurs. You know, we can't line up in a Pep-esque 4-3-3 without Pep. You know, it makes no sense. And so do I think Tuchel could work? Yes, absolutely. Do I think Allegri could work? Yes, absolutely. Would I want Allegri more? Yes, absolutely. Because he's going to shore up our defense and our midfield, which are shambolic at this point. And secondly, he's going to fit in all the players we need to fit in. You know, like his job is to make the most out of the squad. Like if I recall, in one of his interviews after Juve, he said, "My only ideal or my only principle is winning." That's what we miss. That's exactly what we miss. You know, forget the process and forget ideal ways of playing football. If we wanted that, then we would have given Guardiola a blank check in 2015 when he arrived at City. He said we needed to replace 10 out of 11 members, and we didn't. And we won two league titles in that span, so it's not that serious. But Allegri will get the most out of this squad, and I stand by it. That's what he does. He gets the most out of whatever squad is available to him. Tuchel is more specific in his requirements, and right now we don't have time for specificity. We need results.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting debate because, you know, do we go to someone like Allegri who will maybe grind up more results, or do you still go with Tuchel? Because obviously, I mean, Medianoera, something I picked up there is that you said that Allegri isn't sort of stuck to one way of playing. He's sort of adaptable, and I mean, Thomas Tuchel is as well. I mean, Tuchel, for me, what I've read and what I've seen before, he changes, systems all the time based on the opponent. So I think both Allegri and Tuchel are very good tacticians, and I think they're both very good managers. I just think that with the Germans and sort of with the youngsters especially, I think Tuchel will be a good move because, you see what he's done with Pulisic, Ousmane Dembele, and some of the interviews he's done about the youngsters. I just think it's almost like Lampard, but like a double, treble step up because, yes, he likes the youngsters. And yes, he will play them, but he's also a very good tactician. He also has multiple systems. He'll probably get the best out of Havertz. He'll try and get the best out of Werner. So, I mean, to be honest, guys, it's all up for debate. Let us know down in the comments who you would sort of like as the next Chelsea manager, or do you think that still Lampard can turn it around? We're open for debate. I mean, De Boer, is there any way you can see Lampard turning this around, or do you just think that it's the beginning of the end? Do you think that even if we win against Fulham and sort of win the next game, do you sort of think that the next sort of bad run of form we'll be having this same discussion? Do you think that it's just delaying the inevitable basically, and we should just get rid of him?
To put it bluntly, I think it all depends on the dressing room and how the players are going to respond to this result. Say he is given the game against Fulham. If we see a response that we've seen, like for example, like today, then I think he'll probably go after Fulham. So I think it all depends on the players, really. Like it seems like from what if these reports are true, then it would be delaying the inevitable. Because again, I think we've all touched upon it. When the dressing room is lost, never salvaged. So it would be delaying the inevitable. I think Fulham is not really the best game to see whether it's a real response. So it's a tough one. I'm really glad I'm not in the position of making this decision myself. But I think it's one where it'll depend on the players and how they respond. But it could be delaying the inevitable. Yeah.
Yeah, it's also a very interesting debate whether you guys think that it is delaying the inevitable, or do you obviously think that he can turn it around and he has got the answer. So just the last thing there, I've actually seen as well that Lampard has again blamed some of the players after today's result. He said that we lost due to individual mistakes. So I mean, this is just this is getting worse. Really, he's throwing more players under the bus. And if the reports are to be believed from the Athletic, then this isn't just going to go down well, is it? So anyway, we'll see what happens over the next few days. Thank you to Medianoera for coming on. Of course, we'll link his stuff down below in the description as usual. And hey guys, just let us know down below what you think will happen with Lampard, what manager you think we should appoint, and if we are getting a new manager, what do you think the next team should be under the manager? Because obviously, every time we appoint a new manager, he's going to have different ideas, different systems, and he will, play different players. So, all up for debate. So much happening right now, guys. But, thank you for listening to the episode, and we will see you in the next one.